All right. Welcome back, everybody. If you were on the last session, we're glad to have you back. If this is your first time on the session with What Drives Winning and myself, Becky, Burleigh, and Brett Ledbetter, welcome. These are standalone sessions, but just to talk a little bit about what we hit last time, we were talking about creating an environment where people can do their best work. And last week or 2 weeks ago, we talked about defining standards. But today we're going to talk about how to manage above the line behavior. And with that being said, I'm going to throw it away to Brett.
All right. Thank you, Becky. So we'll go ahead and get started. As Becky mentioned, that anytime you set a standard, you draw a line between what is acceptable and unacceptable behavior. And the idea that comes from Anson is that players do what you inspect, not what you expect. And so this is going to get into the management section around how do you reinforce behavior in a way that leads to winning. And so Urban Meyer, who's an American football coach, wrote a book called Above the Line Behavior. And essentially the idea was anything that meets the standards of the program is considered above the line behavior. Anything that doesn't is considered below the line behavior. And so the goal is to catch above the line and to convert below the line. Becky, one of the things that you obviously love about this section is it's often missed by coaches.
Absolutely. I think when Brett and I talk about this, I think this is probably my favorite section because I think a lot of coaches think about managing behavior as only dealing with problems. And I think managing behavior by highlighting some of the good things that are going on in your organization can make a huge difference.
And I think that the best coaches I've been around understand that. Mike Krzyzewski, who led the Olympic team, and we featured him last call as well, had something to say. And Becky, I'd just like your thoughts as he says this. Is that audio come? Oh, all right.
We as coaches can always catch a kid doing something wrong, and we overlook the things that they're doing right. They'll do less wrong things if we catch the right things.
Thoughts, Becky?
So true, because I feel like as coaches, we're always trying to fix things. We're always trying to make things better on our team. And because of that, like our lens is trained on the things that are going wrong instead of the things that are going right.
And what I'd like to do is I'd like everyone to open up the chat. And I think we have the ability to ask questions and do things like that on this call that maybe we're limited to last call. But if you all look at this, I would love to know what you think about it. And it looks like we have a hand raise. Becky, I'm going to let you take a run at that name. Is it Sukana? All right, we're going to keep it moving just in case that was an accident. So here's what we're going to do. I love it. Hey, so here's my question, though, to the chat is how do you all feel about this line? So if you could start texting in, what do you think about when you see what Mike Krzyzewski says? And as you do that, we're going to go ahead and keep it moving. And Becky, a good friend of yours is Jack Clark, who coaches rugby. And let me do this real quick. So Tom, I don't have host capabilities, I don't think. And so I can't mute attendees, I don't believe.
Just give permission for everyone to be able to unmute.
All righty. So that being said, Becky, do you want to give a quick intro to Jack Clark?
Sure. Jack is a rugby coach here in the U.S. at Cal Berkeley, and he has just dominated the space in his sport for sure. But he's also just a terrific innovator in the space of like creating a business environment within his sport in terms of making sure that he audits his success. He has a really structured way that he runs his team. And I think his players get an awful lot more than just rugby out of being coached by Jack.
And we showed Jack that clip and asked for his interpretation. And here's what he said.
Well, just keeping it real as a coach, I probably got that wrong for about 20 years. I'm from the McAfee clan, and there's always something wrong, you know, and I was the guy that always pointed it out. But
Can I ask you a question on that? Why do you think it took you so long?
Well, we were successful. And, you know, it's hard to audit success. It really, you know, it takes a bit of experience to really make changes when you're winning. But it's the right thing to do, you know. I mean, I think if we were having a bad training session and I called the team in and just gave them the business, you know, somebody's making a physical breakdown, a skill breakdown, somebody has a mental breakdown, somebody else has effort, and they're kind of boxcarring those mistakes together. I really had 20 years of, you know, giving them the business and sending them back out there, and they never got better once. And then you just find a way to, you know, as Coach Hay says, find something positive. You know, a guy passes the ball to another guy, and it's a good pass. The guy drops it. It drives me crazy the guy dropped the ball. But I say good pass. And, you know, with just some positive speak sometimes, you can really pull a team, you know, out of a funk, you know. You've got to, you know, keep it real. I mean, you can't say you look sharp in your unis today, you know. but I mean, I think there's a way with positive speak and speaking to people's strengths, especially, that you can build the right culture, and at the same time, you can pull a team out of a funk.
And is there a time that it's okay or acceptable to be negative, in your mind?
Well, there's always a time to be honest. And I think that we need to have the correct touchstones where we can really be honest with the team, you know where we stand. But I try to train myself, go 70-30 strengths to when I'm talking about something that we're not doing well. I want to spend most of my time talking about what we're doing well, what we can do anytime, anywhere, and how we leverage it.
And I think that that's something that so many coaches miss in America. Becky, do you want to comment on that?
Well, especially when he talks about the 70-30. I mean, if he's trying to find 70% of the things going right and 30% of his time spending on what's going wrong, I think that's probably reversed for a lot of coaches.
And Becky, you said something great. You said that when you stopped practice, if you audited over the 2 decades, it was usually when something was going wrong, not when something was going right.
Absolutely. I mean, I think of how many times I stopped practice to just say, that was perfect. That was exactly what we're looking for. I mean, I could probably count that on 2 hands.
And so that really does undermine the healthy environment you're trying to create. And I think that that's what Gino Auriemma, who we heard from as well last time, coaches basketball for the UConn Women Huskies. Most successful coach in American sport, baby Becky. Him and Bill Belichick are certainly in the conversation.
Totally.
And here's something that he had a realization about.
There's a lot of coaches, me included, that were hoarders. We hoard every play. So if a kid makes a mistake, 5 minutes later, after they've had 5 great minutes of basketball, and they make a mistake that's similar to the one they made 5 minutes ago, you can't wait to pile on that same mistake and revisit that history. So I think as coaches, if we are the kind of coaches that let go of what just happened and focus on, all right, make the next play, then I think your players start to play like that. Now, some struggle with that, don't get me wrong, but I think we as coaches can really be influential in that area. And I found that when I'm a hoarder and I'm like waiting to pile it on, they're waiting to make the next mistake. When I let it go and I just say, come on, let's go, move on to the next thing, they move on to the next thing.
So what I challenge everyone to do is, how much do you think that the leader influences the next play speed, getting to the next thing of the people they lead? I would ask everyone that on the call. And as you start to type in your answers to that in the chat, how much does the leader influence the next play speed? Becky, I want to share a story with you. I saw a coach who was beat up, and he wrote down all the different things. And this was just, he diaries. And so he was just writing down all the different things that his spouse was doing that really triggered him. And so obviously these are the negative things one could interpret. The spouse finds the 2 pages.
Oh, no.
What effect do you think that had?
I can't think that was a real positive conversation after that.
And I think that's why I just want to set up what you're going to hear from the UCLA softball coach, Kelly Perez, and then you guys can unpack this.
A lot of people ask me what's your worst moment as a coach, and I remember my low. So it was early in my head coaching. It was actually my first year as a head coach. I remember writing down, I was in the dugout and we were not playing well. And I was writing everything down that we were doing wrong. Like, oh, well, we should have done this, or we should have done that. And my list got to almost, it was definitely double digits of just all these things that were just wrong. And it was building. I was like almost anticipating, I was looking for the failure. So I was writing it all down. And then we had our post-game meeting. And of course, because I'm such a smart coach, I let him have it with the tone of what I was feeling when I was writing everything down and writing through my paper, right? And so I said everything, and we did this, and we did that, and we did it. And I remember looking up, and I will never forget the look on their faces. I completely sold out on them, and I was complete, what I now call Captain Obvious.
And she lost the team, Becky. Why do you think that was?
Well, I mean, I think the whole Captain Obvious is like, our players say it all the time. Like, you know, when someone passes to the other team, like no one's trying to do that. So if I say like, let's keep it, like that's Captain Obvious. Of course, we're trying to keep the ball on our team. So I think players, especially the higher level you go, get really annoyed when you point out things that they obviously are not trying to do, but are mistakes that occur.
And again, I think it goes back to exactly what Mike Krzyzewski said. They'll do less wrong things if we catch the right things. And he's going to break down what a right thing is.
A right thing is not just hitting the bucket. A right thing is a kid saying something that's encouraging. The right thing is a block out, a rebound, being smart in a certain situation, being enthusiastic on the bench, helping a teammate. Boy, that was really good. Jimmy, you really helped John in that case. Pointing those things out or pointing out winning plays. Yeah, because you want them to do it over and over again.
And so the way that happens, Becky, is that you have to retrain your lens off execution and really trying to get to behavior in the moment, which is a challenge for a lot of coaches. You actually tried something in the off season with this.
I did. And even before I get to that, I just want to say this, like the last game we played, we have a player on our team who, whether she starts or whether she plays a minute in the game, she has the same affect. I mean, she's amazing. She's like the best force on the bench in a positive way. She's the best force on the field when she's communicating. And so she was on the bench in this particular game. And I said to her, I really appreciate the fact that you are the same no matter what. And she said, she goes, I'm not happy when I don't play. And it's not easy for me to do that, but it sure is nice for that to be recognized. And I think that might be the first time that anyone's ever said that to her. So I think it just goes to show you how much it means when you point out the right thing. But when I tried to do this with our team, I took a spring where our spring competitions are friendlies. So instead of focusing on anything to do with execution, all I did was watch behavior. And man, did it point out some things to me that really needed some work. But it was very hard because I kept getting distracted by the game itself or the outcome itself.
And I think that's exactly what happens with coaches. And so I got a great story about this with an NBA team that I was working with. I was working with one of their athletes. I asked for the game film. Well, out of efficiency, they basically just sent all the execution, the basketball specific stuff. All I wanted to see what was happening with the action between the action, to see how he was responding to bad calls, missed shots, other players talking trash, being looked off by a teammate. That's where you can really identify the behavior that wins and holds teams together when they encounter adversities. And so what I did to just help a coach is I looked at all the different things. You can see these different things. Talked about this last time in a game, and just wrote down everything that they weren't performing up until the standard that they wanted to attack. And then we just tried to find ways to celebrate when they did those different things. And so that's what we're going to get into right now. We're going to just look at some of the different strategies for catching above the line behavior. The first one is very momentary. It's called Praise the Model. And really it comes from PJ Fleck, who is the football coach at Minnesota. And here's what he says.
We talk about praising the model, right? So out of everything that we're teaching, there is someone that's going to do it correctly. And so as we watch that, we use that to highlight exactly what we want. We don't teach them what we don't want. We want to teach them what we do want.
And again, Becky, the reason Praise the Model is so powerful is because when you're trying to set up your how you, it can be overwhelming to try and share exactly what you want your standards to be day one. So you can't cover everything before you start. So this is a great way in the moment to illustrate what it looks like.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that, because if you tried to cover everything at the beginning, you probably have like a 3-day meeting. But as you go,
and what do you think the retention would be on that meeting, Becky?
I can tell you what it would be with my team. It would probably last about 30 minutes of attention, and the rest would be daydreaming.
Becky's big on talking about TikTok attention. You want to talk about that, Becky?
Well, if you don't know, TikTok's pretty short. So once you get past that time limit, you're stretching it.
And why do you think people love TikTok so much?
I think because it changes all the time. You know, it's like a subject. You can pick your topic, but you get a different video. So there is no need for an attention span.
And to that point, if we're relating it back to Praise the Model, every practice, every situation presents new context, and you can educate them within 5 to 10 seconds with exactly what you're trying to do in a way that's engaging, and then they can keep it moving, just like TikTok. And that's something that Bill Belichick always talks about, this, and I love it. I mean, you got to love it, Becky, because when this is how he answered, how do you orient newcomers to the environment? And basically what he's saying is the most important thing a vet can do is model what we want inside the environment so people can take the cues from the vet. And so when you have a coach and you connect those two, how would you do that, Becky?
For me, I think it is like exactly like I think about, we have a vet on our team right now who the warm-up part of our practice it's kind of the same every day. And it's sort of like easy to go through the motions if you're not focused. But her attention to detail in what we do in that part is really great. And like being able to see someone of her stature, you know, she's a national team player who's had an amazing success, to be able to take the detail of that and apply that to someone who's a rookie who thinks, this isn't the important part of practice. The important part is when we actually start kicking the ball. Like that, there's nothing more that she needs to say or do besides doing that for that rookie.
And as a coach, when you call that out, the rookie sees it, and then they start to understand these are the high performance norms that will get us to where we're trying to go. And I wanted to pull an example here to show you what it looks like when people focus on the behaviors. So right here, what you're going to see is a player, Scotty Lewis. He's going to come off of a screen and get the basketball. And what's going to happen is he commits a charge. So from a basketball perspective, that is an undesired outcome. But what happens next is pretty incredible. Sets the ball down, runs back. And what's amazing about Scotty is on his shoe, he has next play speed, which means whatever happens, I'm going to get to the next thing. And when he executes that, it is so important to reinforce it because one, it shows the support and it shows that you value the action between the action more so than the basketball specific movement. Becky, how many coaches would get caught up on the charge there?
Oh, I mean, I think most of them, because they would think, you know, what are you doing? Like the charge is the problem, instead of recognizing how he responds to the charge. And I think that is such a, it's always about how you respond, isn't it? It doesn't even have to do with sports. It's how you respond to anything that happens in life, not exactly what happens.
And it cuts through the noise too, because if a coach comes in and shows you, hey, we value response over the execution because we know the execution has come. We know how competent this person is. that cuts through all the noise because it's exactly the opposite of anything they've been socialized. And so it allows you to really gauge them in a way that they haven't been. The next thing we're going to talk about is building an identity. This is something that I worked on very closely with the Gonzaga men's basketball team, who's going to enter this season #1. And it's something that basically we have this thumbprint, and it's just like the iPhone, and it's identity formation. And the whole idea is that through the season, everyone's going to put their DNA on the logo, on the culture. And so what we're trying to do is build up a bottom-up approach versus top-down. And Becky, you've been around so many different environments at Florida, which was referred to as Title Town. It's almost like Boston is for professional sports with the Celtics, the Red Sox, all the different sports there that win championships. Florida's the same. Talk about the qualitative difference for the athlete in both of these situations.
You know, I think the top-down model at times may seem efficient, but I'm not sure that the experience that the athlete has in the top-down model is going to be as rich as when they are the ones that are creating the culture and driving the culture from a bottom-up perspective.
And I think that the whole goal is that people don't sink the boat that they're in. And so the more ownership you can give them with the bottom-up approach, the more bought in they are to that. And something that was really big to this team that we worked with to build this identity is what is real is unspoken. And so what we wanted to do is something with the real, and we actually wanted to highlight real with highlight reels. Everyone's familiar with SportsCenter when they run the highlights. We wanted to do a different reel. So for example, when this happens, this is who they are when they're at the best. And if you see at the bottom left of the screen right here, you can see the thumbprint. They call these ID clips. And at the end of the year, they run all their ID clips, because when things count, it's who can be who they are in adversity, because it's very easy to be who you are when things are going well. It's hard when things are going bad. And so that's how they anchor into an identity. One other thing I wanted to show you is they were ranked #1, and Baylor jumped them after Gonzaga won by quite a bit. And the next day they have what they call PGMs, Personal Growth Mondays. The strength coach facilitates those, and the strength coach asked the team, hey, did anyone see the rankings? They said yes. How do you feel about those? And one of their players said this: I didn't care when they ranked us 1. Why would I care if they ranked us 2? And so you can see in the bottom right, that's an ID statement. I've seen this, that Oklahoma, they have an incredible football program. They've had the past 2 or 3 Heismans in the past, however many. So, I mean, it's amazing what they're doing. And it's called OU DNA. And so this is a quarterback that transferred from Alabama after a game. He's not doing that for physical performance. He's instilling a mentality. And anytime you see those sorts of things, you can then double down on it and reinforce it. They do it with OU DNA, and it gets back to the most important thing a veteran can do. Now, Becky, my challenge to you, and a challenge to any company, is what do you do when their work is not filmed? So how can you create identity statements or a sense of identity even though it's not filmed? And Becky, while you talk to that, that would be my question for everyone on this. How could you use ID clips, ID statements, and build an identity inside your organization? I'd be very curious to see what the chat thread comes up. Take us into your world. Becky, you can talk about what the Orlando Pride does from a front office perspective.
Yeah, even before that. So when I was at Florida in our athletic association, we used to have a thing called shout outs, and anyone could submit a shout out to someone, to an employee. And then they were collected, and the end of each week, the shout outs were posted. And there was incentivized to shout out, because if you got a shout out, then at the end of the month, everybody's name was put in this raffle, and whoever got pulled from the shout out raffle got like a $200 gift card or something. So there was an incentive to get a shout out, but also to give one, because there was two raffles, one for the people who gave the shout outs and one for the people who received them. So I think that was a really good way of trying to get people's lens trained on seeing the right things and seeing the good things happening. And obviously there was no film involved in that. So you could be creative with it.
And I hope we can get some chats on there. And Becky, maybe now would be a good time to just pause for just a second to see if anybody has any questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Tom, how do we navigate the Q&A portion of this?
I think they can unmute themselves, Brett. And so if anybody has a question, if you want to unmute yourself, or if you want to type it in the chat, I can read it out too, and we can go in depth with those questions. Can we call on Becky Wetz and tell us a little bit more about her shout outs and the all hands meeting? Becky, can you unmute and talk a little bit about that?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sure. Yeah, so this is something we do every Monday with helping instill our values, I guess, more like our DNA and, what makes our employees part of our company. And it's all, well, as much as we try to make it behavior led as well, trying to, recognize that and show how important we see it. And I guess by doing so, incentivizing others as well.
I love, Becky, that you said it was behavior led, because I think it's easy in companies to recognize outcomes like sales or numbers that you've hit and things like that. I think, when I was talking about the shout outs that we had at the Athletic Association, it was more about people who are going outside of their job description to help someone else, or things that were above and beyond what they were supposed to be doing. So I love that it was behavior led in your case.
Hey,
well,
Becky, do you
some
mind
at the time.
if so I'm going to do something. Becky Wetz, can you come back here for a second?
Hello.
What up? Hey, I just want to show you this, and I just like your thoughts. Can I just get your thoughts on this immediately? Because I think it ties well with what you said, and I just want to know, when you see this, how the heck do you interpret it? All right. With your example, what are you trying to model to the team as a member of the team?
Well, I always tell them that, this is a greatest hit. The leader is the person doing the right thing. I try to make leadership something that is moment by moment, and not necessarily status based. And I tell them now that I don't actually think that's the definition of leadership. The definition of leadership, in my opinion, is the leader is the person everyone is following. Like there's a lot of people that have led for bad rather than for good, but because they've been able to amass a following, it doesn't make them not leaders, unfortunately. But I do think that inside of our walls, defining leadership as the leader, is the person doing the right thing. I think it's a powerful statement. It's the person doing the right thing, not the person saying the right thing, not the person who did the right thing yesterday. It's the person doing the right thing. I think that makes leadership accessible to everyone and entitled to no one. And so that's one thing that when you're in a leadership position and you define leadership like that, you're basically signaling that you're willing to hold yourself to that and basically say, look, if I'm not doing the right thing, I may be the head coach. I'm not leading in that moment. You knock yourself down to a level where you're held accountable for your actions in a given moment. And your leadership is not tied to your status as the head coach, but it's tied to your behavior in the moment. And it helps Trey Mann walk into the environment and have confidence that if he shows up and is on time and is ready to go, he's leading in that moment. He's got access to that right off the bat, even though he is a rookie player and he doesn't know how to walk and chew gum.
Becky, talk to me.
Me, Becky, or other Becky?
Yep.
Okay. So I think everything that was said is correct, but from me as a leader, I think my emphasis even is much more on encouraging my team to, not just follow in my shoes, but to be authentically themselves as well, within the confines of, the behaviors that we want to recognize within our business. So I kind of see your job as a leader both as setting the scene and acting the way that you want others to, whilst also encouraging them to explore what that means for them, because it might not always be the same for everyone.
That's a beautiful point, Becky. Can I ask you this? When he said that when you look at it moment by moment, it's accessible to all and entitled to none, how do you think about that?
I don't know, to be honest.
We're going deep, Becky.
I need some processing time.
Well, what's your first blush at it? And then we'll throw it over to the other Becky in Orlando, Florida.
So say it again, moment to moment.
When you look at leadership as moment to moment, so you're not attaching it to a person, but more to a behavior. Mm-hmm. It's accessible to all and entitled to none. How do you think about that?
I think, to me, that it's exactly right. I think that leadership is about, demonstrating certain values or behaviors and encouraging others. And I don't think that is unique to a leader. An important thing in my team is to try and have everyone feel like a leader, within that space, and have, the ability to encourage others, which we do regularly, and sometimes, recognize when that's not happening as well. So yeah, I would definitely agree.
Well, and I think is it Juliana?
Juliana.
Close. Thank you, Juliana. Is doubling down on your response, Becky. And now we're going to go to Becky in Orlando. What do you take from that, Becky?
I think it's a really modern way of thinking about leadership, because I think leadership in the past is so hierarchied, like the senior level employee or the senior on a team, the veteran as opposed to the rookie. And I think that goes back to that top-down approach, which in my opinion, it's getting harder and harder for people to buy into that. But if it's attached to the moment, then it makes that senior level employee just as responsible for doing the right thing. Even if they've done the right thing for 10 years, they still have to continue to do the right thing to be a leader.
Amen. And I think that's going to parlay into the next point, which is a strategy called orchestrating peer recognition. And that's what Coach K is going to talk about.
First of all, I'd sit down with them individually, and tell them that they have the talent to do that. I think sometimes we say, well, this kid could do it, but we never tell him that he can do it or how to do it, and so you give them suggestions, like, it'd be really good if you pat someone on the back. And today, I'd like for you, if Jimmy is down after he misses his first shot, to go up to him and say, keep shooting. And so you give them different things like that. And what a coach says is important, but boy, what a peer says to one another is so darn important, especially if that guy who's the best player says something to another player. It's such a force multiplier on a team, and it produces a connection, because it's all based on care. I care enough about you to help you in that regard.
Isn't that powerful, Becky?
Yeah, it reminds me of a really powerful story. We have a player on our team who was a gold medalist this last Olympics. And she would go to the coach every single day and say, hey, who needs a little something today? And the coach would tell her. And she would go to each player every time the coach told her, and sort of find out what that need was and fill that need for that player. The end of the tournament comes, and the coach singles out our player for saying she's the thing that got them over the line to get the gold medal, because she was willing to invest in all those other individuals throughout the course of the 1 month long tournament. And I think it benefited her just as much as it benefited the other people, because she was out of her own head. She was giving to others, and that peer recognition made a huge difference in their team's ability to win the gold.
Why do you think it matters more coming from a teammate?
I think that players feel like coaches are supposed to give them positive reinforcement, and they're supposed to tell them things almost like it's a way to get them to perform better. A player has no motivation for that. Like, if they're doing it, it's really coming from within them, and there's no hidden agenda. I think with a coach, sometimes that can come into play.
And I think what Coach K is doing is he's orchestrating scenarios where he can watch them develop and lead. Because for that player you're mentioning, Becky, that was natural for her. But how many players on your roster have that natural ability to just say, that's what I want, that's how I want to contribute today?
Not that many. It takes a little convincing.
And so that's where it's so important. And that's one way that you can do it sort of behind the scenes. Kelly Perez learned from making all those notes on what her team was doing wrong. And this is what she does now.
Your words become more powerful when you get your players to talk to not just the word, but examples of it.
So what she does is she has a word of the day and they define it. And then this is what happens.
Whatever words I say, I ask what that looks like. And then I ask for examples and have them shout it out. We circle up a lot and have them talk to it. Otherwise, they just become words.
And what's so cool about that strategy, when peers are calling out peers for positive behavior, there's so many things that a coach misses just because they're one set of eyes.
And we're not in the same spaces all the time either. I mean, I think there's so many little micro behaviors that occur in the locker room or at the coffee break or wherever. I think that it just helps so much when you get people in that mode of recognizing the good in others.
Amen. And this last one I want to show you is, or the next one, we got two more, is encourage behavioral streaks. And this is Gino and Anson talking about something in Chicago.
I've had kids come to me and say, Coach, I want to win a national championship. I want to be an All-American. I want to play on the Olympic team. Well, that used to be in college, women's basketball especially, the three things that you had as your goals. Now, everybody wants to play in the WNBA or play overseas, whatever they want to do. So I had one kid, especially in her sophomore year, I called her in the office and I said, remember what you told me? And she said, yeah. So it's not going to happen. I said, it's not going to happen. Watching you for 2 years here, it's not going to happen. So here's your choices. Change your goals or change your work habits.
How good is that? And what I'd like everyone to do, if you have a sheet of paper there, is answer this question.
One of those
is, if you think about what is one thing you need to add to your life, or one thing you need to subtract from your life, or both. What's one thing you need to add to your life? What's one thing you can subtract to your life? Becky, you've had this conversation with a player. What have you learned about this conversation?
I think, first of all, when you're asking for just one thing, it doesn't feel overwhelming. And so it feels like something that's actually doable. And especially if you're partnering with them to sort of, help hold them accountable to doing it. And then I think the second thing is it sort of helps them almost like do a quick audit of what is actually
favorite answer you've got to this question.
My favorite answer, honestly, probably the most productive one that actually had an outcome was put borders around certain relationships that they had, like some boundaries. And it was more, it wasn't like, you know, a relationship meaning like, let's spend less time with my boyfriend or girlfriend. It was more like, I can't listen to that voice.
And we call those unwanted visitors. There's such a great John Mayer clip saying that celebrities spend so much money on security, but then they get on their phone. So they value the physical space over their head space. And the mind is such an important thing. And you want to keep out unwanted visitors. And I think that's exactly what Becky is alluding to. And once you have that habit, you can then start to track days. And Becky, do you remember Tim Corbin, the baseball coach at Vanderbilt? We asked him what his streak was at getting up in the morning at 5 a.m. to work out. And what did he say?
Oh my gosh. It was in the 3 digits.
734 days. And so what that shows you is that there are streaks that matter to people. And you can look at the question, how do you get them addicted to the standard? And if you think like an app developer, that can help change the behavior in a productive way. The last thing we're going to talk about is expressing appreciation. And here's why that is so important. Antidorance, Becky, one of your competitors, has a higher percentage winning national championships than in-season games, which is interesting because national championships, they're playing the best opponent and they have a higher percentage. And he talks about why he thinks that is.
If a team gets to the national championship game, I spend the entire day in preparation for this championship moment by writing a letter to every senior on my roster, thanking her for the incredible human contribution she has made to my team.
It's worked 22 out of 24 times.
It's the fuel that against the best team in the country on the final day of the season that puts us in a position where out of 24 games, we win 22. But here is an even extended impact of these letters. One year, I was in a panic. We're in the Final Four, and I'm looking at our bracket, and I'm thinking, you know what? I think I've got to use the senior letter in the semifinal. The team we're playing in the semifinal is Portland. They are absolutely unbelievable. This is the Christine Sinclair Portland. She is the star for Canada, currently playing in the World Cup. I'm thinking, you know what? I don't think we can beat them without the final weapon, the senior letter. So I'm thinking, yeah, we're going to roll out the senior letter. And sure enough, I am carving away on these letters. I hand them out. And yep, they deliver me to the final where we promptly lost, by the way. So the letters have actually worked 23 out of 24 times.
Only time they didn't work, Becky, was with you.
Well, yeah, we did play Anson in the final, and we beat him in the final. So he always lets me know that too.
I love it. And it parlays great into this.
And there's an unexpected response from the fan base.
It was like a concert when we walked into the arena.
And you had no idea that that was going to happen?
No, we had no idea. And it hasn't happened since.
So what he's saying is amazing.
Don't really give a crap anymore about it.
But how do you process
now? It's
that?
like people are like, "What the hell?" You know, get out. The bus is causing traffic or whatever. You know, they could care less now.
But Becky, that's interesting because basically that one time, the first time you won it, explosion, pageantry, post hasn't happened since. And if you think about it, Billy Donovan said this: expectations without appreciation leads to a cold, entitled environment. And what that sounds like is when people say this or think this: you did what you're supposed to do. Why would I praise that? Silence is praise. You'll hear me when you're wrong. On to the next. And so many coaches are guilty of those things, Becky.
Yeah, this is a tough one because I think it's like it's almost like a double standard. Like we would be really upset if our athletic director or our vice president, GM, whatever, said to us, like, well, you were supposed to win that game. Like, why are you getting so excited about winning that game? But then sometimes we do that same exact thing to our teams, like, because as leaders or as coaches, we're thinking on to the next, as far as like, okay, I got to get prepared for the next game. We forget to stay in the moment and actually celebrate that game. And for the players who are experiencing that for the first time, that just sends a really tough message.
And that's exactly what your colleague, Billy Donovan, said.
When you accomplish something really, really good, I always felt like there should be a great celebration, always. Because the minute you start creating a level of expectation, or this is supposed to happen, I think you create an environment of entitlement. And you lose perspective of how hard it actually is.
Amen. Becky, your thoughts?
I love the quote in the chat from Scott. Said the husband on the 50th wedding anniversary, I told you I love you when we got married. I'll let you know if that changes. I can't believe they've been married 50 years, to be honest.
Different times, Becky. Different times. Hey, so well, those are some ideas to get you thinking. I know we don't have breakout rooms. Otherwise, we would ask you to spend some time in reflection and think through what strategies work for you. Are there additional strategies that you use that could lead to an acknowledgement that you're seeing the meaningful work that the people you lead do? And so I would just challenge you to think on that. And then we also want to leave 10 minutes. If there were any questions specifically on where you want to take this. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Becky. Becky, you could curate the questions and then we can roll from there.
Yeah, sure. You all feel free to put any questions you have in the chat, and then we can invite you into the conversation. There is one here from Patty. It says, how do you deal with poor performance while staying positive? What about repeated poor performance? And I know that, Brett, as we get into this series, we're going to talk about managing below the line behavior on the next one. But how would you answer that one to begin with?
I would ask Patty to come into the conversation. So Patty, can you unmute yourself and just give me a little context behind the question you're asking?
I'm shy.
Hey, Patty, we can still see you have a very little picture there.
Oh, is my camera on?
No, it's a screenshot, but I would just love to hear behind, like, what is the context behind that question?
So listening to the coaches and the great examples today and the 5 strategic takeaways is very refreshing. Also refreshing in that I've kind of heard a lot of it before, and I'm constantly asking myself, I've made just about every mistake that you've highlighted today. Many times over. I'm particularly good at, hey, that's your job. And I loved the last comment about, I told you I loved you 50 years ago, and I'll let you know if that changes. I can really identify with that as well. So, but I've only been with my wife 20 years, so bit of work going on there. So my challenge is, particularly with, so we're working in a sales environment, complex sales, there's a lot of skills and development goes in when, skills development and knowledge transfer that has to happen when we hire people. And, we're really, really delighted to have Jiminny as a coaching aid to help us with that, and also as a coaching aid for our people to review themselves and their conversations and what have you. So, but there are times when it's clear people aren't getting it, and I often feel like I'm walking on eggshells to try to let someone know, hey, you're not getting it. I've tried to explain it, and I've tried to explain it this way, and someone else has tried to explain it, and someone else has tried to explain it this way. And we want to keep this all positive. We want peers, and we want everyone to learn, et cetera, et cetera. And it seems to be extraordinarily difficult to strike that balance. And I think it was the rugby coach, and I can identify with rugby coaches. I've played a lot in my time. And I know it's like, to keep it real, everybody really does know what mediocre and not very good looks like. No one wants to be called out on it. But so yeah, that's really the foundation behind my question.
So is there, not identifying names, Patty, is there someone that comes to mind that you could role play and then we could just have a conversation? If I was brought in to do this with an athlete, we see this a lot in the NBA. Two reasons. One, changing levels from an individual standpoint is very challenging for those guys. So it takes a while because, as you said, your sales process is more complex. The league is much more complex. And then also, if you get drafted high, if you're very good at something, you're going to a franchise that did not perform well the year before most times. And so you're about to hit a ton of adversity, more adversity than maybe you've ever hit in your life. And a lot of times I'm asked to work on those kinds of situations as well. And so my question, Patty, would be, can we do a quick little role play where you could give me answers that would simulate what they would say if you were asking the questions?
Yeah. You guys are good at putting people on the spot.
Well, you're the good news is
I just thought this was going to be an easy session for the end of my day, and then I could, ease into my evening, and here I am beginning to feel really.
This will give you a good reason. It'll build momentum for you to have a glass of wine. How about that?
Yeah, no, I'm trying to avoid that kind of momentum on professional advice. But okay, let's give it a lash.
All right.
What's the worst that can happen?
Patty, I would literally just say the first thing is scale of 1 to 10. How do you think you're performing?
I think I'm doing really well. I think I'm a great contributor.
And what would you rate it on a scale of 1 to 10?
I guess I'm an 8. I think, yeah.
And what would help for you to close that gap?
Well, I think my management could be a bit more supportive, and I think if you would change some of the model, if the pricing was different, if I had more authority to discount, if I had more authority to do things a different way, I think I'd be closing more business.
Can I ask a question?
That's one.
There's a quote. We're still in role play.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, boss.
There's a quote by Gino Auriemma that says, "Great players can play for any coach. That's what makes them great." How do you think about that one?
Never heard of him.
And so let's say he's one of the best coaches that's ever done it in America. And so there's the credibility piece.
No, I'm being facetious there. So that sounds right. I think I'm one of those players that can play, for every coach. This isn't my first job. I've been around.
And that's exactly what I think. And so you're limiting some of these constraints that we don't have control over. And so my question to you is, how do you overcome that? How do you leverage what you have to overcome that?
So what I'm modeling here is the response that I get.
What's that?
I've just modeled the response I get.
Then I love that. So I would say, hey, first of all, thank you for the reflection. It sounds like this might be something that you would like to create some space on. Can I actually have you think through that and come back to me tomorrow and just tell me what you think about that? And then maybe through that, we can dig a little deeper.
You're pretty good at this.
No, it's what I've done is here's what I would say. I heard a great line, Patty. Actually, it was on Sunday. A coach said this, that we have to place a higher value on perception, that players' perception is their assistant coach to their reality.
Yeah.
And you would not believe some of the delusions that I've had to undress working with NBA players. Like, I was just on a call. This athlete's made $1 billion, and someone asked him, hey, do you think you could live on $1 billion? And they said no. Isn't that amazing? So the reality is that their perception.
Well, how many wives and girlfriends does he have, and you know, how many dealers is he supporting? But maybe we shouldn't go there.
So the point is if you're like, dude, you're nuts, you've now drawn a line, and it's going to be combative from that point forward. So my goal is always just through questions to meet their perception where it is. I think the challenge for you, Patty, is figuring out the line of when it's time to cut someone loose versus continue to support. It sounds like that would be a challenge in your position.
That is a challenge, and it's a reality. I guess mentally, I feel like there's a spectrum here where you start off, and I guess I feel like I've not gotten it right very often, where you start off spoon feeding as you want someone to absorb, just, you know, trust us on this, absorb this. When you start doing it right, you'll be able to look back and you'll realize why you were told how to do this before you knew how to do it. And then there's the positive coaching and support, you know, and actively looking for opportunities to praise people and what they do and their performance. And then when it comes to when, you know, things start to slide a bit, it's like, okay, we need to get this back on track. And that's where it's hard to you know, break the model, if you like, where suddenly people think, oh, hold on a second, now we're seeing a different manager here. Who's this guy? And I'm back in the Bill Belichick camp thinking, you stop doing your job. And but now, hold on a second. No, you're not. You said we're a team. You said our culture was we're a team and we look after each other and we look after everyone. And now, you know, you're not looking after me anymore. And it's like, yeah, what part of you not doing your job anymore aren't you getting? And then it's inevitably it's the crash and burn, you know. And I feel like, and I'm sure you haven't said this, it's almost like what I'm hearing is, okay, if your supportive coaching model isn't getting the job done, don't turn into the nasty guy. Skip that phase.
Well, I think, Becky, should we pay Patty for the segue to next session?
I know. I was actually going to say, like, you could not pick a more perfect idea to lead into the next one, because I think, Patty, you're absolutely right. There comes a point where, you know, you have to make decisions that are hard decisions. And I think that's what we will talk about in managing below the line behavior, because certainly it's not all, you know, daffodils and roses out there for us. Like, we all have issues that we have to deal with that are below the line. And I think the next session, if I had to say what coach's favorite session is, it's always the next one, because they think of managing as dealing with below the line. So I think there's going to be a lot of really great nuggets as to how to decide, for example, like when it's time to cut someone loose in that next session. I think this session is a really good one to remind us all that, you know, I think Brett just showed it in real life. Like the longer you can stay on the same side of an issue with someone and try and help them through it, the better chance you have to get them to stay above the line. But there are times when it's going to come down to, making those hard decisions. So I think that was a perfect, your example is a really good one that all of us face, no doubt.
And the only thing I would challenge you is something Chris Peterson said, Patty, who's a football coach at the University of Washington, very well respected in America. He said that so many times he watches his assistants go below the line when his players go below the line. And how can you convert the below the line behavior while staying above the line yourself? So you model consistency. I think that's what we'll really attack next time.
Okay. I'm going to sign in under a pseudonym next time.
Well, Patty, enjoy the wine tonight, man. Thank you so much for your participation.
In recognition of the American influence today, I think I'm going to go with a Napa Valley Pinot Noir.
Ooh, there we go.
Yeah, I'm gonna open one of those.
Well,
all right, guys. Thanks a lot.
All right, Patty, and thanks everybody else for joining. We look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Appreciate y'all.